Hi there, and welcome back. So today I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about Star Wars. So since the release of The Last Jedi this past Christmas, there seems to have been a lot of controversy surrounding the Star Wars franchise. The Last Jedi and the most recent film Solo, A Star Wars Story, have both received a lot of negative feedback from fans, and from what I understand have performed relatively badly at box offices. Now, there are various narratives as to why this might be, and I wanted to take the time now to talk about what I think of these particular perspectives, my own perspective on the Star Wars franchise up till now and moving forward, and what I think about these films. Now, for transparency's sake, I will say I am an absolutely huge fan of the Star Wars franchise. I have seen every film from The Phantom Menace up to The Last Jedi in cinemas. Now, bear in mind, I was quite young when the prequels came out, and at the time I really enjoyed them. But mainly that was because I was uncritical and I just enjoyed the space battles and lightsaber fights. As I've gotten older, I've started to appreciate the fact that the prequels were pretty terrible. So I think a good place to start with this would be with the beginning of the new trilogy, which was The Force Awakens in December 2015. Now, I really enjoyed The Force Awakens, and it's one of those films that I can go back to and watch again and appreciate. It's a well put together film, and it's enjoyable and entertaining. Yes, it has its flaws, and I could probably complain about the fact that it felt more or less like a carbon copy of A New Hope. But considering they were trying to bring the franchise to a new generation, I understand why they may have decided to recycle a few of the storylines and tropes from the original trilogy. The following year we got Rogue One, which was the first installment in their spin-off series A Star Wars Story. So these are standalone canonical films that typically focus on the period of time between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. Now, I really enjoyed Rogue One. It was a slightly darker take on the Star Wars universe, and it filled in a few of the gaps that existed in the original trilogy. However, this isn't to say it was free from flaw either. One of the issues I had with the film was its over-reliance on CGI characters that I think could have been used a lot more sparingly and probably a lot more respectfully. It also had a problem for developing its character. Despite being an interesting film and having some interesting arcs, a lot of the characters are unfortunately forgettable. Now finally, this brings us to this Christmas's release of The Last Jedi. Now, this film was received rather negatively by a lot of fans, myself included, to be honest. Now, I went to see this film on release, and neither me nor my girlfriend came out of the theatre feeling quite as excited or having enjoyed the film the same way we had with The Force Awakens. I can't say that either of us hated the film, but I can't say that either of us loved it either. Now, there are a lot of theories as to why people did not enjoy this film, and I have a few of my own. I want to talk a bit about the arguments made by people who are focusing more on social issues as opposed to cinematic ones. So last month, as a few of you may have heard, a few disgruntled fans decided that they had worked out what had ruined The Last Jedi, and they went on a social media crusade to address this issue. Now, these fans came with the argument that The Last Jedi had forced diversity within it, and that was the reason that the film had flopped. And they cited a particular character as evidence of this. This being a character debuted in The Last Jedi, a character called Rose, who was played by an actress called Kelly Marie Tran. Now, I haven't seen her in any other film, so I can't attest to her acting ability as a whole. However, in this film, I can't say she was anything exceptional. She wasn't amazing, but she wasn't terrible. However, a lot of people were unhappy with the introduction of this character, arguing that it was an example of forced diversity quotas within Hollywood and other industries. And they decided to take out their frustrations on Marie herself on social media. So much so that she actually decided to deactivate her Twitter account. Now, quite frankly, I don't understand the people who did this. Not only because attacking some actress because you don't like the character she portrayed in a film or her performance in said film, to the point that she leaves social media, that doesn't make any sense to me. It's not constructive and it doesn't achieve anything. Is it really going to make the film better, or is it going to improve any future films? My other problem with this argument is I don't think forced diversity was the problem with this character. Now, I can't attest to Disney's motivations for hiring her or creating this character in the first place, but quite frankly, I don't think it would have mattered if the character was white, black, male, female, alien, or droid. The problem with the character wasn't who played it, but more the fact that the character seemed to be shoehorned into the film, to the point where she almost undermined some of the characters that had been introduced in The Force Awakens, specifically John Boyega's character Finn. We were given a little bit of plot exposition as to her importance in the storyline and as to why she would be getting introduced into the storyline. Now, I think she would have made for a very interesting side character, one that could have been developed throughout the film and then brought to the forefront perhaps in the next Star Wars film. But instead they rushed to bring her to the forefront of this film. In my opinion, it wasn't to do with who played the character or their performance. It was more to do with the way the character was written and implemented in the film. I think it was poorly done and very ham-fisted, and this is a theme you'll see in a lot of my critiques of this film. So the next film to come out after The Last Jedi was Solo, which, as I said, I haven't seen, so I'm not going to talk about the cinematic issues of the film. However, I did want to talk about an article that I came across. This released by Forbes, and it's entitled, "As Solo, a Star Wars Story Flops, Are Movies About White Men Box Office Poison?" This is almost the polar opposite of the narrative I saw within The Last Jedi. Instead of it being about forced diversity or too much diversity in film, it's the opposite. Solo wasn't diverse enough. There wasn't enough diversity in films, and that's why it flopped. Now, much like the previous narrative, this one doesn't make much sense to me either. I don't think Solo's failure was anything to do with the main character being white. From what I've heard, the cast was actually quite diverse, and it had an interesting array of different characters with different ideologies apparently as well. I think the failure of Solo is more to do with the negative reaction that The Last Jedi got than it is to do with any social issue. The same way that The Last Jedi's failure is more to do with cinematic problems than it is to do with any social issue. So what do I think has gone wrong in the recent Star Wars films? Well, like I said, I don't think you can attribute it to a social issue, or at least not to the degree people are. Now, I'm not saying that these social narratives haven't had an effect on the performance of these films in the box office. I'm sure there are people out there who have refused to see the film because it didn't conform to their particular political beliefs. There are people out there like that. I don't personally understand them, but that's entirely up to them. I think the primary issue within the new Star Wars films is more to do with cinematic failures. The best way to describe it is, I think the films have been Disneyified. And that's not a knock against Disney. Actually, I really like Disney. I've been enjoying their Marvel films. I liked Pirates of the Caribbean, well, maybe up to the third film. And I love their old animated stuff. Actually, one of me and my girlfriend's favourite Disney films is Lady and the Tramp. It's got amazing animation, really interesting music, and it just makes for a good film. But saying that, Disney do have a formula when it comes to their films. One of the major criticisms I would have of them is they have an inconsistency in the people who produce their films. They don't stick to one director or team for each franchise. They instead have different directors for every single individual film, with the exception of a couple. I would have happily seen J.J. Abrams direct all 3 of the new Star Wars films. This for a couple of reasons. The main one being consistency. I do feel like J.J. Abrams had a few ideas when he made The Force Awakens as to where he thought the franchise might go. And the new director, whose name escapes me right now, has kind of undermined a lot of the story arcs that J.J. Abrams had started. I think this frustrated a lot of fans. I think a lot of people were looking forward to seeing where things were going to progress. But instead of the storylines and arcs progressing, they were kind of cut short. Another major problem, and I'm going to link a video in the description below that talks entirely about this, is the fact that most Disney and Marvel films rely way too much on humour. And this was definitely a problem in The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi used humour all the time, to the point where it actually deflated scenes. A good example of this would be the initial interactions between Poe Dameron and Huxley. They had the opportunity to have a bit of humour and banter within that interaction, but also maintain the fact that Huxley should be an intimidating foe. He should be an intimidating antagonist. But instead they completely undermined that. They made him look like a fool, and the fact that the humour itself wasn't all that good didn't help.
It completely deflated that scene, it undermined one of the characters, and it didn't make the scene seem as tense as it could otherwise have been. This leads me straight on to another point, is the fact that the new Star Wars films have been awful for wasting and misusing characters. Huxley being one, who I think could be a very intimidating antagonist, but he seems to be the brunt of most of the jokes in these films. Another obvious example is Snoke, who I think everybody wanted to know where that was going to go and what his storyline was going to be, but he just got killed off so nonchalantly. We know nothing about him and he's already been killed off. And probably the one that annoys me the most is Captain Phasma. You want an example of a strong female character? That would have been your opportunity. And she was completely wasted in both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Which annoys me even more because the actress who plays her also plays Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones, which is a show I really like and will probably do a video on in the future. She knows how to play a strong female character who can be sympathetic or intimidating. She could have done a really good job with that character, but the character was wasted. That's not to say that The Last Jedi was a cinematic failure. For example, the choreography for the fight scenes was pretty damn awesome. It was very well done and very well shot. There was none of this shaky cam nonsense. You actually got to see everything that was going on, and it was interesting to watch, and it was exciting, nerve-wracking at some points. The CGI was pretty good, and I'm quite glad to see that Disney haven't entirely thrown out the concept of practical effects, or not yet anyway. Despite the writing in The Last Jedi being reasonably poor, there were some interesting character arcs and character development, and I can't say that I hate the story overall, although I feel like it could have been better done and a lot shorter. There were a lot of scenes that could have been cut out that just felt unnecessary. They felt like dead weight. There were a lot of plot contrivances that were just there to drag the film out, and it always felt like it was to force the characters into certain positions at certain times just for the sake of plot, or just for the sake of a cool action scene, or a cringy action scene. And obviously there were a few scenes that were rather cringeworthy. One comes to mind right off the top of my head. Now, I don't think there's no place for social commentary or social analysis when it comes to media. Actually, when it's done right, it can be great. A good example of this was Childish Gambino's latest music video, This Is America. That video was very well done and it was chock full of social commentary. However, Gambino didn't spoon-feed his audience the message he was trying to give, which allowed for interpretation from different people. And even if you didn't agree necessarily with the social commentary he was making, you could appreciate the video and the music itself as being well done. The same can't be said for the Star Wars film though. The few bits of social commentary that I've picked out in these films have been rather unimpactful and ham-fisted at best. I think my final takeaway and the motivation for this video as a whole is that I don't think there's anything wrong with there being social commentary or social issues infused in different mediums. Like I said, when it's done well, it can be great. What I do have an issue with though is people using things that I enjoy, music, films, all sorts of media, as a way to just push some sort of social narrative. In my opinion, the people that are making these claims about the Star Wars films on either side, they don't actually care about the films in a wider context. They don't actually care about why the films are failing. They just want to attribute the failure of these films to whatever social cause it is they stand up for. And that bugs me, not only because I think the assertions that these people are making are weak and inaccurate, but they actually don't address the problem that these films had. And it doesn't allow for any improvement. If these films were critiqued properly on the basis that they had cinematic failures, and that there's issues within the franchise that need to be addressed, that would be fine because at least it opens up the door for improvement. But when it comes to these social narratives and social arguments, somebody's always going to be angry. There's someone at one side or the other that's always going to be upset. You're never going to please everybody. I would much rather that Disney just try and make a good, solid Star Wars film instead of trying to pander to a different political demographic. From what I've heard, Solo has a character that's meant to be taking the piss out of SJWs, or is an SJW. I've heard differing arguments about that. It's not necessary. You don't need to try and appease different political groups. Just try and make a good film. Write a good story. Create interesting characters, but don't force them into the films.
Allow for organic and natural character development. And don't overuse humour. Not every single film has to be an Iron Man film, for fuck's sake. Anyway, I think that was everything I wanted to say. I do actually have another video loosely related to Star Wars coming out this evening as well, that I'm going to record the audio for literally this minute. Don't worry though, it's not a rambly video like this one was. It'll hopefully be quite short. And it's very lighthearted, and it's a bit different for my channel. It's something new, just something I wanted to try out to see what you guys think. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. But as usual, if you had anything you want to say to me, leave a comment down below. It lets me see what you guys think about the things I'm saying. It allows me to improve my content where necessary, and it gives us the opportunity to converse with one another and have a dialogue, which at the end of the day is the most important thing. And, as usual guys, you look after yourself.